Hey everyone, welcome back to Smart Architectural Programming. And this is another video on our Introduction to Java playlist, as well as one of the accompanying videos to our Introduction to Java book. Today we're diving into a super important fundamental of a Java arrays, which is accessing and modifying elements in arrays basically. And yes, that means loops, logic, and learning from common mistakes. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. So the first thing we need to understand is how do you access values in Java, right? That's the first thing we need to develop an understanding on, right? So remember that when working with collections of data like arrays or lists, you'll need to access specific elements to read or modify them. Let's start with arrays, right? And that's what we're going to be focusing on in this video. So when we talk about arrays, let me open my marker here and let's get a different color. Yeah. So now that we have that here, so we need to remember basically that we see when we have covered how to set up arrays, declare, initialize them. We have that array here, but we need to always remember that like everything in computer science, they're always zero index. So, and I've covered this multiple times in the previous videos, but for more clarity, I'm going to go over here again. So indexes in Java are starting from 0. They're always 0 index. So the number 1 is 0, number 2 is 1, number 3 is 2, basically, right? It's simple, easy. So fruits 0 that we have trying to print out the value over here below, by accessing it using the square bracket notation, it's gonna pick up the first value, which is apple. Right? That's what zero indexing mean, and that's what zero indexes result in. And you can understand that very, very simply here as you focus on this side. This is a table that basically breaks down exactly the indexing and the elements themselves that are on this side in this array here, right? So understanding this is going to be a very important component of you basically for you to be able to work with the arrays as such basically. You'll use the same approach for lists, generally speaking, except that you used to use the get.get method. But again, we're not focusing on the lists. So let's move on to the next thing, which is how we use loops to access elements in arrays. So let's look at loops right now, right? So how do we use loops to access elements? You'll see on the screen right now, we have two loops here, right? The first is a simple loop. In which a for loop has been used to go to when we know how many elements we are dealing with basically. Here you'll notice that fruits.length gives us the size of the array. And the reason we have used fruits.length here is to always remember that we to avoid out of bounds error, we always make sure that we use a dynamic function to get the exact length of the array. And this counter is going to start from 0, and ultimately what this function is doing, it's printing out each and every element of that loop of that array basically. Another way we use an enhanced for loop, which is somewhat unique to Java, where we use a for loop, a for each loop, which is an enhanced loop in Java basically, to set up and do the same thing as we're doing above. And this is so that we keep it cleaner compared to a normal for loop basically. So whether you're looping through arrays or lists, use loops when you work with every item without repeating yourself. So let's move on to the next thing, which is how do we modify elements within the arrays. Simply speaking, we use again the square notation that we mentioned when we were printing out values, but with the square notation here. And again, like I've gone over the square notation so many times in the previous videos that I don't think that it's necessary for me to delve deeper into it. And it's very, very simple to understand: the name of the variable and then the square brackets and the index of that variable, right? So when we use an equality sign as we're using here, you'll notice, let me circle that in green. This equality sign basically means that assign whatever value is to the right of the sign to the index of that array that we're trying to access, right? So when we do that, we change the value of the array at that position, number 1 to blueberry, right? That we set up in the line 1 here. Similarly, we can use a dot set function as well. In this dot set function, we need to put in two values. The first is the index value. So we put in the index. We use the array's name dot set function. So the first value here is the index. Once you set up the index here, which is what you're seeing here right now, then the second value, this is the first value here, and the second value to run this function is going to be the name that you want to assign to that particular place in the index. So once you print the statement out, you'll see London is printed over here, and we assign the London value to the second index in this function over here. So that's how we modify elements in Java. Simple, succinct, and easy to do. So now let's focus on some of the errors that you might want to avoid when working with arrays and particularly accessing and modifying elements in arrays. So the first error I mentioned earlier, why we use the dot length value, is the index out of bounds error. You'll notice here that we are trying to print using the square notation value. We try to access a value that or index position that does not exist in the array at all. This leads to the index out of bounds error that we see here. Similarly, if you null pointer exception error is basically when we try to print a value when we have not declared any value within that particular array slot, right? If you try to access an array slot that does not have any value in it, that's what leads to null error, null pointer exception. You see here in line 3 we declared an array and we set up the array, but that does not mean we have values in that array. So when we try to use the square notation, we'll notice we're getting output as null on print, and when we use the dot length method, we got the null pointer exception error because it is simple to see that there's nothing in those spaces. We reserved the seats, but the seats are empty and there's no one there. And when we try to ask, hey, who's sitting on that chair that you reserved? If no one's sitting on there, you'll get null. Yeah, nobody's sitting there. Who are you trying to meet? That person isn't sitting on that seat. So always remember, Java errors can be intimidating at first, but once you know exactly what to look for, they become your greatest learning tools to understand exactly where your code went wrong. So let's wrap it up. In this video, you learned how to access arrays and list elements, use for and for each loops, modify elements using index or methods like .set, and avoid common errors like index out of bounds and null values. Want to level up? Try this. Write a program that loops through a list of temperatures and replaces any value below 0 with the word freezing. Share it in the comments, and let's our open source community in the comments fight it out what is the best solution to solve this particular problem. Thanks for watching another intro to Java companion video by Smart Architectural Programming. If you were following along the book, this was part of chapter 6 and it's the third video of chapter 6 that we're covering. Hit that like button, subscribe for more programming deep dives, and let us know in your questions or wins in the comments below. Happy coding and see you in our next video. Thank you.